Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Film for Fans podcast, the podcast from movie fans for movie fans. I am your host, Ryan Dunlevy, joined by my co-host, Rob Dunham.
Evening.
What you got there? I can't really tell. Oh, pirates. Okay.
Yeah, it's like a kind of cool pirate theme take on the Pirates
Yeah.
logo. I got it from it was an in stadium only hat,
Oh.
and it's I decided every Pirates game I go to, I'm going to buy a hat
Mm,
from the stadium. So
yeah.
that's what I got. But this is not a Pirates hat
This is
podcast.
not a Pirates Hat podcast. It is not a hat podcast. This is a movie podcast. And we have an excellent show. We will talk about the box office. We will give an update on the next part of Dune. We'll talk about horror films that maybe go too far. We will discuss movie ownership and, of course, our watch list. All right, Rob, let's get it started. Box office debuts. Capture the title. Number one at the box office for this past weekend was Halloween Ends at $40.1 million. So the supposed end of the series uh, has a pretty big release. That's one of the bigger releases you will see for a horror genre film. Obviously, it has a lot of legacy going for it. Number two, another horror film, Smile, does 12.6 million. It is now up to 71.3 in its 3-week run. Lyle Lyle Crocodile, the kids movie, did 7.4 million. It has 22 million in its 2-week run. The Woman King at 3.7 has 59.8 million for its 5-week run. And Amsterdam in its second week does 2.8 million and to close out the top five. Rob, what do you make of the box office?
I'm pretty impressed with the number for Halloween,
Yeah.
and I don't think I would have predicted it to be that high.
Well,
Um,
especially with the streaming component, because this
yeah,
came out on
yeah,
Peacock. I mean, Peacock
yeah.
isn't the biggest streaming service, but still.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely could have seen it having maybe half of this or a little over half of this number, exactly given what you said.
Yeah.
I think this is an indicator for us if we have not already picked up on it, just in general, that people are going back
Hmm.
to the movie theater. Because I think if this would have been a year ago, the numbers would have been a lot different based
Yeah.
on the fact that it was releasing on streaming at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there are, I will say there are certain movies, I wouldn't say genres, but movies where you want the full experience. And I would say a movie like this where you want that in theater sound, you want that scary experience. So I think that's one of the ones where it's more of a destination movie also, I think. So I think that helped it also. Um, I'm not surprised that first and second come in for horror, given the time of year we were in. People are in the mood for that. Any other takeaways from the box office?
Not a whole lot, really. I mean, I think it's pretty true to form for what we expected. There's not, like you said, real any major studio movies that came out over the last couple of weeks that would have threatened any of
Yeah.
these. And um,
Hmm.
I do think that I am still impressed by the Halloween number because I don't think we've talked about this before, where you might go to the theater and be like, "What should I go watch?" Like, I don't necessarily think that a horror movie is one that people would just be like, "Yeah, let's go watch that."
Yeah.
Um, so I do think it's an impressive showing for Halloween
Mhm.
Ends to have the number that it does.
I will say I still need to go see Amsterdam. It's still the number one on my list to go to. And I was a little surprised given the sheer number of stars in that movie that it has not done a little better.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if that's just because of when it came out, or if people just there wasn't a ton of promotion for it. I know that much. But I would have thought if you're just looking to go to a movie and you see all of these big name actors in it, you'd be like, oh, let's go see that. So
Yeah,
I,
I think it,
yeah.
from what I saw, it was marketed way more in like an independent movie style.
Hmm.
Like if you would compare it to uh Death on the Nile, which was everywhere,
Yeah.
like marketing wise, and had the same kind of like well known ensemble cast.
Hmm.
This is the like same type cast wise, just was not approached in that way by the studio.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. It's true. Um, okay. So that's the box office for last weekend. We have three movies that are debuting this weekend. Um, Probably the biggest release among them is Black Adam, starring The Rock. And that, of course, is the superhero movie. And this is nearly 5,000 years after he was bestowed with almighty powers of the Egyptian gods and imprisoned just as quickly. Black Adam is freed from his earthly tomb, ready to unleash his unique form of justice on the modern world. And like I said, of course, this stars Dwayne Johnson. Aldous Hodge reprises his role as Hawkman. We have Pierce Brosnan is in there. Noah Center. I don't know how to pronounce that guy's name. Sarah Shahi is in this also. So there's your cast on that. What do you make of Black Adam? Interested, not interested, somewhere in between?
Well, it's obviously going to have a huge number because all the James Bond fans are going to come out to watch Pierce Brosnan. Um,
This is a
I,
DC franchise, by the way, in
yeah,
case you're not aware of that.
I will probably go see it. I think
Hmm.
I wouldn't say I'm super hyped up to see it, but I will also say that if we're going to play, I think we should play the prediction game on this one because I think this one
Mm. Okay.
is one where it could be. I could see this coming in a very wide range
Yeah, I think you're
of
right.
totals because I think Dwayne Johnson is an absolute draw
Hmm.
in the theater, especially being the main character as a superhero. Um, I'm going to guess that this movie will do 75 to 80 million dollars opening weekend.
Okay. Okay. I was thinking a similar range, but I got to make a different guess. So, um, I'm gonna say I'm gonna go 85 million. I was trying to
Okay.
decide whether I wanted to go less or more. I'll go more. I'll go 85 million.
So saying that number, I would say, although I'm not super crazy excited about it, I think there are going to be people who are. And I think enough people to have that kind of draw in the box office.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Do you think it will be good?
That's a really good question.
Because it's not the
That's a
same as whether
terrible
people will
descriptor
go see it.
to give your question since you asked me if it would be good.
Yeah.
That's an intriguing question.
Yeah.
Because DC has had DC is just so all over the map when it
Exactly.
comes to quality, and
Exactly.
I'm so hesitant to trust them with a movie like this because the movies that they've had with traditional superheroes where they try and make a regular superhero movie have almost universally not been great with this iteration of the franchises. I mean, the ones that have been really good, like Joker, even I would say, but the new Batman, those movies aren't like typical superhero movies. They're dark and
Hmm.
they're brooding and they're more inward focused. And this is not that kind of movie. So I'm
I,
really not sure.
I will say to give them some props, they have done reasonably well with origin stories. So the first Wonder Woman was a pretty good movie. Aquaman was a pretty good movie. Even going back, Man of Steel was a pretty good movie. It's once they get past the introduction to the character that they really start, it just goes downhill from there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so they have been okay at making those. movies work. However, they are, I would say, much more well-known characters than Black Adam.
Yeah,
Um, so there is, I wouldn't say it's harder to screw up because yeah, they've screwed him up.
yeah.
Um, but
I mean, like,
there's a more well-worn path, I would say, towards those ones,
and
I
the
guess,
interesting thing
ways.
about what you said about Black Adam being well known, like when the Guardians of the Galaxy came out,
Hmm.
unless you were a major comic book nerd, you had
You
no
did
idea
not
who
know
that
who they
was.
were. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it
Mhm.
is the and this is probably it would display itself more in the long run of word of mouth and people going back
Yeah.
after the first weekend.
Hmm.
But if this is a good movie and if enough people can connect with the character, then it will make a lot of money.
Yeah.
But that's the real question. Is this
Hmm.
a movie that's gonna come out big and then hold have staying power? And it's
Yeah.
gonna have to be that that character connects with people. And one thing I really I personally am a big fan of Dwayne Johnson. He really does not have a huge amount of range, but I like the kind of characters he plays. I think some people are really not as interested in him for that reason.
Hmm.
Um, but that's the question I have. Will he be able to do something with this character that differentiates it from um, who he has been in a lot of other movies? Or
Yeah.
is he just going to be The Rock
Yeah.
playing a superhero?
That's the question. That's the question. Because a lot of his other roles now, he is just The Rock. You know, he's The Rock in this, he's The Rock in that. This would require him to be less The Rock.
Mm.
So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. So I have
So
you down at 75 to 80 million, is what you said?
yeah. So
Okay.
since you asked me and I kind of answered, do you
Hmm.
think it's going to be a good movie?
Um, I would say on the top end, it's going to be decent. So I would say if I were placing a bet on where it was going to be from like great, good, decent, bad, I would probably place it at decent.
Hmm.
I think it has a chance to be good and a chance to be I think that's its range, but I would place probably on it being decent. That's my guess, but who knows? All right, so we got two more movies coming out this weekend. The next one is Ticket to Paradise. And this, of course, stars George Clooney and Julia Roberts. A divorced couple teams up and travels to Bali to stop their daughter from making the same mistake they think they made 25 years ago. So we've got a kind of a romantic comedy starring George Clooney and Julia Roberts, who are no strangers to the box office themselves. They have been in multiple movies together. Rob, what do you make of Ticket to Paradise?
Oh, golly gee. I wonder if they're going to end up together at the end of the movie. Mm.
Are you saying that this genre has very spelled out plot lines?
No, I wouldn't say it's formulaic at all. Uh, yeah, I don't know. There's not a whole lot that excites me about this, honestly.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like I already know what's going to happen. Maybe it's not. Maybe it won't. But when you read a plot synopsis like that, it's like, well, I want obviously,
Yeah. Well, and I think, I mean, I think it will do reasonably well because you can have all the couples who are like 50 years old and over go into this movie. Um, so, I mean, I think they're still somewhat of a draw. I don't think they have the broad audience that they used to, uh,
Mm-hmm.
but I think there's still there's enough people who would want to see them in these roles that it will do a decent number, um, but nothing crazy. And our last release for this weekend is My Policeman. And this is starring Harry Styles, um, Emma Corrin, and Gina McKee. Rupert Everett is also in this one. And this is the arrival of Patrick into Marion and Tom's home triggers the exploration of seismic events from 40 years previously. That's kind of enigmatic. I don't really know that I understand what that means
I'm
from the
pretty
description.
sure they don't mean earthquake. So
Yeah. Um, so Harry Styles, when he is not stealing Olivia Wilde, is apparently still starring in movies. Um, so yeah, My Policeman. I have no idea what to make of this film.
yeah, the all I have to say is they're really trying to make Harry Styles happen.
Yeah, that's stop trying to make fetch happen, guys. It's not going
Yeah,
to happen.
yeah, it was. I mean, I don't think he was terrible in "Don't Worry, Darling," which I did have a chance to see, but I also don't think he was like that. He wasn't anything special
Yeah.
in it. Yeah,
Yeah. So that's your entrance into the box office. And of course, most of your other films will be in there as well. So check it out. You got lots of varying options.
I would say out of all of these movies, I'm most excited to watch a movie that comes out on October 28th on Netflix.
All Quiet on the Western Front?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So we'll talk about that next week, though,
Yeah.
because that will be coming out next week.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to get to that one because I am also equally excited about that. All right, ma'am. Let's go to a couple of news stories. And the first one is we've got an update on Dune, and it is a good update. I like these type of updates because it seems like every time you got a movie release update for the last couple of years, it was all right, how much longer do we have to wait for this one?
Yeah, yeah.
No longer, people. Dune Part 2 has its release date pushed forward. Yes, that's right. We will get to see the second part of the Dune sequel earlier. Now, don't get too excited. It's only a couple weeks earlier, but still, it's earlier. Um, uh, Basically, Marvel put a pause on the Blade movie while it's searching for a new director, and so they needed something to fill the role that Blade was going to occupy, and they have moved Dune. Dune will now be released on November 3rd, 2023, as opposed to November 17th, 2023. So yeah, we're not getting a huge break on this one, but still 2 weeks is 2 weeks. I'll take it. Rob, what do you make of getting to see Dune earlier?
I mean, anytime I get to use the word Fortnite in the sentence, I'm very excited. So we get to see Dune an entire fortnight before it was originally scheduled.
Love it.
And 2 weeks earlier, I will absolutely take over a year and a half delay, like we had heard for some things when this pandemic started. So,
Yeah. And I'm just pleased because not only are we getting it 2 weeks earlier, like when the original one was out released, we weren't even sure if we were getting a second one.
yeah,
And so the fact that we're getting it next year and we're getting it earlier than we thought is all good news.
yeah, I'm already super excited that there is a second one. So,
Hmm.
any positive news about it is just more exciting.
Yeah. And I actually watched Dune, the first Dune, this week. So we'll get to that when we get to the watch list. So yeah, Dune's coming out a couple weeks earlier. Can't wait. All right, so the next story, and I have to give credit for this one. This story came to me from my wife of all people. Don't
Given
know
the
how
context
she.
of the story, that is very surprising to me.
Yeah, I have absolutely no idea how she came across this, but apparently she did, and yeah.
I think those
So
sleepless baby nights might be turning your wife into a different person.
yeah, that'd be weird.
Uh,
So let me read you the title. This is from the New York Post. Depraved horror movie causes viewers to vomit and faint in theaters. I know you're intrigued. Basically, the idea is this slasher flick, Terrifier 2, is apparently so graphic that when they showed it to test audiences, they were vomiting and passing out in their seats. Yeah, so that's the marketing for this movie. Everyone who shows up gets has to pass out, vomit, have other sort of horrible type things. Now, this is a crowd-funded horror indie flick, which is supposed to play in over 850 theaters nationwide, and it is supposedly uncut and uncompromised, and it's the sequel to an original movie called Terrifier, which apparently was also bloody and disgusting. Um, Rob, I know you have a little bit of experience with this genre. What do you make of Terrifier 2?
So this movie is playing in at least the Regal in New York. I don't know about
Mm,
Lancaster. Um, I am always very skeptical when it comes to a movie being described this way because I feel like it's um, a lot of times just hype and, like you said, marketing. Like I do think that um, they have used this kind of language to try and get people to be like, "Oh, it sounds so scary. It sounds so gross. Let's go watch it." And, like I
yeah.
don't really know if it is or will be. Um, However, I will say that I have seen the first 5 minutes of Terrifier, the original
Mm,
one from a couple of years ago, and that was only a couple minutes, but it was very graphic. Showed someone's eyes getting gouged out by someone else, um, and showed the introduction of this clown guy, Art the clown, and he looked very creepy. He definitely looks scarier than anything that happened in the two new It movies. So I don't know. Um, I'm not necessarily sold on the believability of people who are literally passing out in their seats and throwing up in the bathroom. The fact that it's a New York Post article also does not help because yeah, I don't trust them either.
so the question here is like, okay, you got to give me numbers on this one. There are no numbers associated with this. How many people passed out?
Mm-hmm.
How many people puked? Okay. If one guy had a bad sandwich and puked and passed out, and you're reading a story, oh, it was so graphic. Someone puked and passed out. Oh my goodness. Now, if we're talking like you've got 10 people unconscious and like buckets of vomit hanging out all over the theater that they're having to bring in a team of sanitizers to come in and clean the theater. Okay, now we're talking about something. Otherwise, I mean, I'm going to need some numbers on that.
Yeah,
Uh,
I did
yeah.
like the one person was like posting a picture of their Instagram of like their friend on a stretcher and like this movie made my friend totally almost die. It was awesome. Like
Because that's what I mean. That's what friends do, man. They laugh at you, they Instagram you, and then they make sure you're okay.
yeah, sure.
Yeah, yeah. But in terms of the idea, like I, it's the same kind of thing with like the shock jock radio, where it's like when somebody just intends and like think like Stephen A. Smith or some of those guys they just they're intentionally saying ridiculous stupid, awful things just to get attention, just to get everyone to go,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I can't believe he said that. I can't believe he said that. I think there might be something at play here similar to this. It's like we're just going to throw in just make something as bloody, as messy, as gory, and as violent as we can humanly can, just because we can, just so that we can get people talking about it. I think there's definitely something to it. Um, what do you think? How far is too far? Like where do you draw a line with um saying like, okay, you shouldn't go this far in a film in terms of like gore and violence and blood and that sort of thing.
I mean, I'll say there's only one movie that has ever made me feel that way, like uncomfortable. That
Mhm.
actually made me physically sick. Like I not that I threw up or anything, but I really did not enjoy the experience, and that was the movie Hostel.
Mm.
Um, and I don't know what it was about that movie particularly. Maybe just that the violence and torture in it just felt so personal,
Mm.
and extreme. So I don't know if it's that personal connection that makes it, so bad. Um, I mean, there's just some really messed up stuff
Yeah.
in that movie. Uh, Cutting somebody's Achilles tendon and making them stand up and walk away from a chair.
Hmm.
Uh, Not something you really want to see. Maybe for me it was the fact that very few horror movies can I relate to because I'm very and one of the reasons why I like the genre is I'm very easily able to dissociate myself from what I'm watching
Hmm.
because I think there's no possible way any of this could happen to me.
Yeah.
Um, Something like that, I guess, when it's like so hands on and so focused, like could make you feel more like, hey, this could maybe happen to me, and that's way scarier.
Hmm.
So maybe that's why people are so unnerved by this. That if someone was this crazy and did some of these things, it could actually happen
Yeah.
in their personal lives or to someone they care about. I'm not really sure what it is that. So I don't know where that line is because I think it's different for every person because I think it does relate to how you're able to distance yourself from
Hmm.
things. Some people can barely watch anything scary because they love nightmares all night. I've
Yeah.
just never been that person. So
I, I I mean, and not being a fan of the horror genre itself, I'm maybe not the most qualified to answer it, but one of the things that always has struck me is what exactly is the goal here? Like, are you creating something that's actually art? Are you creating something that's designed for an experience, or are you just glorifying violence? Or are you glorifying like evil and, you know, mayhem and all this stuff? Is it just, hey, we just want to bask in, how depraved we can make something? That to me is when it goes too far. If you can justify what you're doing and why you're having it, you can have an artistic flavor to it. Or if it's consistent, logically consistent on some level, I think maybe there's a place for it. When it just crosses a line to glorifying for the sake of glorifying it, that's when it maybe goes too far.
yeah, I think and you think about a movie like Seven, where there's obviously some very disturbing, messed up things
Yeah.
that happen, but they all serve the purpose of
Hmm.
telling the story of who this guy is and why they're doing what they're doing,
Yeah.
as opposed to some other movies that just kind of have torture for the sake of let's be violent because
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, that is our news stories for the day. Now let's move on to our discussion topic. So the context in our discussion topic is I bought a house about a year ago. And when we were moving in, like my giant movie rack that housed all of my movies broke. And ever since then, my movies have been in boxes in my office for almost an entire year, and it's driving me nuts. And I haven't been able to find like the right system or the right thing I would do or how I want to put them in there. And so
A
it's just
so
been
yeah, so A, that's crazy. B, that explains why I haven't seen the giant movie case behind you. And C, it's been that long since I haven't seen the giant movie case behind you, which seems impossible to me.
yeah, 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 exactly. Uh, so I that got me thinking about the whole idea of movie ownership. And so I thought we'd have a discussion about movie ownership, and we'll talk about some things like, is movie ownership still a viable investment? What determines which movies we end up owning, digital, physical, older format movies, where we see all that going. So let's just jump into it. Let's jump into movie ownership. Um, let's start with the what determines, like, what is your general view of movie ownership at this point? Let's start there.
You can't like own a movie, man. Um, so I have a lot of movies. There's actually a case behind me right here.
Yeah.
See, that is showing roughly a third of the movies in boxes that are in my current room that I'm in. Um, I like to buy movies. I like to only buy movies generally that I have seen and like.
Hmm.
Makes me a
Mhm.
little different than some other people. Some people buy a movie just to check it out, like it's in the discount bin or whatever. Um, I know this was a big thing, like when Blockbuster used to sell like used movies. You could
Yeah.
get a movie for like a couple bucks. Um, so I tend to gravitate towards only buying things that I've seen and know I like and want to have in my collection to go back and watch
Yeah.
later. Um, Obviously, there's a ton of streaming services out there now
Mhm.
with a lot of movies on them. But unless it's a Disney movie, you might not know where it is.
Yeah.
And there are tools to search for that kind of thing, but um, even with those tools, does not necessarily mean that the movie is going to be available on one of those
Yeah, you'd be
platforms.
surprised as to how many movies are not actually on any of the streaming services. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
of course, you can always pay to rent basically anything on Apple or on Amazon or something like that. But rentals are super expensive. Digital rentals are super expensive. That's why I think it's still a viable means of doing that, owning movies. I still think it's a worthwhile investment, especially when it's a movie you really, really like and really enjoy. Because you don't know when it's going to leave a particular streaming service.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's getting a little bit less like that as some of the streaming services start to hone in on we are the home for these for Warner Brothers or we're the home for these. But even still, not all of them are on there. So I still think there's value in owning movies. I switched in a number of years ago to like mainly the movies I buy are the ones that I rated the highest the previous year. So I will buy the ones that I like the best from the previous year. That way I make sure I have them and I own them. And so I now go much more for quality. Um, Previously I would go for like ones I could get cheap.
Mm-hmm.
So I would buy movies that I'd seen that I thought were at least half decent and I get them when I get them cheap. And that's why I have a lot of movies. Um, because I was doing that for a while. But now I've moved more towards I don't necessarily have to buy all kinds of movies, but I want the ones that I can get um, for the ones that I think are worth it. Um, what else? What else? What do you do for buying? Are you still buying physical copies? Are you buying digital movies? What type of format are you going for at this point?
I tend to still buy physical copies, and it's not because I like necessarily the physical aspect of it. Like I don't like having a lot of clutter around. Um, but I do like a lot of the physical editions have special features and stuff that you don't
Yep,
necessarily get the digital
absolutely.
version. It's major selling point for me. And honestly, when it comes to cost, I pretty much I very rarely buy movies when they first come out. It has to be something that like I'm really absolutely crazy about. Like I bought Dune as soon as it
Yeah,
was available. I bought Inception as soon as it was available. But those are not often.
yeah.
Um,
Tenet was another
I
one that I was
Yeah,
like,
I tend to wait until Black Friday,
yeah,
um, that weekend to buy movies
oh
because
yeah,
every major store has a ton of movies on sale. And honestly, at that point, you can find them cheaper than it is to buy the digital version of them in most
totally.
instances. Um, and I'm wary of buying digital versions through a certain service because you are paying for a license. You're not paying for
Right.
the movie itself. And at some point, those licenses will run out. So I don't know why you would want to invest hundreds of dollars in something that you might not have in 30 years. I
Yeah,
mean, it,
that was
it
the
might be
whole
unlikely that would happen, but it is possible.
that
So
was the whole Bruce Willis thing where he was trying to sue Apple because he couldn't like gift his library, his iTunes library to his daughter or something like that. And that's kind of what brought that to attention. Like you don't actually own any of this stuff when you
yeah,
purchase it from one of these companies.
So I do like having movies in a digital format, but I like so I started a project a few years ago that I want to get back into converting my physical format copies into digital copies to store on my own hard drives.
So
Um,
what is that process like?
so if you have a Blu-ray drive or a DVD drive, um, you can pull the files off of the discs. You have to there's software you have to have to be able to do it. You can't just like put it in and just click like go.
Yeah.
There's software you have to make that happen. Um, and then there's other software you can use to encode it so that it takes up less space. Some people like to keep it the full size. Some people like to, if you make it have a little less space, it can degrade the quality a little bit. So some people don't want to do that. But you only have so much room for things. I would say that when I was doing this before, the full length movies on Blu-ray, if I did, were coming about like 24 gigabytes
Hmm.
of space, and then you could encode them to take up like 3 to 4
Yeah.
gigabytes of space if you had the settings the right way. Which, if you have a movie like 4 gigabyte size, you can store a lot of movies on like a 2 terabyte hard drive.
Yeah.
Um, and then in most instances, in what I would do, there's software you can get to store your movies and have them in a way aesthetically to keep track of them. That's To me, it's just easier than
Hmm.
having to look through a whole bunch of discs to find
Yeah.
what you want, but it also is a very time consuming thing. And if I'm really going to make it happen, I would have to probably spend time doing at least 1 or 2 movies every day for quite a while.
Yeah.
Because it's not something that's just a quick few-minute process. It usually takes a couple hours to get one done.
Hmm.
But I have a lot of friends who have gone that way. That have things stored on their own personal media servers just so that they don't have to ever look at the disc again.
I think for me, I still buy physical copies of most things. Um, and the nice thing about it is almost any version you get now will come with physical copy in multiple formats. So if you buy a Blu-ray, a lot of times it'll come with a DVD, a Blu-ray, and a digital copy. Or, if you buy a 4K movie, it'll come with a Blu-ray, a 4K disc, and a digital version. Most of the modern ones do that. Now, occasionally you'll buy something that's like $5 and it's like a $5 Blu-ray. It doesn't have any digital back backing to it. But a lot of them do have that format. So you don't have to sacrifice like wanting to just pull something up on an app without having to find a disc to have that. So you can have the digital features. You can have the extras and the special features from the disc versions, but still be able to watch digitally or download it to your computer if you want. So that's a nice feature, and I enjoy that thoroughly. I have on occasion purchased movies from iTunes or something because I got an iTunes card or something was a really good deal or that sort of thing. Where I was like, oh, I really want this movie. I don't have it. None of the stores have it. I guess I'll rent it, and then the buying it's like a couple bucks more, so I'll just do it. I've
Yeah,
done that on a couple of occasions. Or sometimes you get like a good the Apple Movie Store has like occasionally they'll have like double features for the price of one. I got like Annihilation and Arrival that way. And so that was a good deal.
yeah. I actually have the exact same 2 movies that I got in the same way. So
Yeah. Yeah, that was a really good deal at the time. But you are absolutely right about Black Friday is the time because they'll discount a lot of stuff that just came out recently to a lot of times less than $10, and that's sometimes for like 4K discs.
yeah,
So it's really worth it. I do stock up on that every single year. What do you still keep around old format movies? Do you still have your DVDs? Do you have any VHS? What do you got there?
We had a good amount of VHS because we had like one of those all-in-one TV players with a VHS
Oh
thing
yeah.
for our kids to watch movies when they were younger. Especially, we had one in their playroom and
Mm,
just had a whole bunch of movies on VHS so they could pop them in and watch whatever they wanted to from that selection when they wanted to watch a movie.
yeah.
Um, but that thing broke, so we don't use that anymore. Um, as far as discs go, I have some I have a lot we have a lot of DVDs,
Hmm.
a decent amount of Blu-rays, and I think we have probably about 15 or so movies in 4K on disc. Um, that would be the ones that we have the least of.
Yeah.
Uh, to me, like I like to have a Blu-ray or 4K just because of the quality, and part of it also is the sound system
Yeah.
that I have because they have better they're sending a better signal. Um, on Blu-ray is better than DVD, and 4K is better than Blu-ray
Yeah.
when it comes to the sound you're gonna get out of the movie. Um, I do have a lot of movies on our Vudu account, which is our like digital movie library,
Hmm.
but almost all of those have been, like you said, with codes from discs. Um, a long time ago, we converted a bunch of our DVD movies onto Vudu. It was like they had some kind of thing where it was like if you for every 10 movies it was half off or something like that. So we
Mm.
had a ton of movies we put on. So basically, we put our entire library, all the ones that had copies in their system, onto there. And then as far as having it on our own server, I started that project a few years ago, but we haven't used it in a while. But I was using Plex, and I probably and
Mm.
I've done that a few different times, and that would be the one that if you're going to do something with, I'd recommend PLEX Plex. Is the server you can connect it to your computer, your hard drive, or whatever, and it can store your movies. You can change the cover art for your movies. You can do all kinds of stuff, and you can organize them however you want um, to make it easier for you to like search through your own library of things. And the other thing I like about them too is you can, like I said, I like special features,
Hmm.
and with that, like a lot of digital services, if you're buying a movie from them, you're not going to get special features. Sometimes you do.
Or
On
sometimes,
Voodoo,
occasionally, it's different special
yeah,
features
we
than
have
what you
we
get
have
otherwise.
the Harry Potter collection from Voodoo, and on that there were a lot of special features. Actually, 7 hour long documentaries, one for
Mm.
each movie. Um, but that's not typical, I would say.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about a thing like Plex is you can pull any of the special features you want from those discs that you own and put them under the like catalog of that movie on your server. So and you can have it set up so you open up the movie and it will show the movie to watch, or it will show all the special features to watch, and you choose to watch whatever you want. And you can name them whatever you want. So you can organize it in a way that makes sense to you, which I really like. And that's the main reason, one of the main reasons why I started using that, because I like special features a lot. And being able to just access them without having to get the disc out is really nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and the digital movie space has gotten better. When they first started giving you digital copies, it was an absolute mess. Like there was this program Ultraviolet, uh, but basically it you couldn't play the movies on there. It would just kind of sort of organize them and then send you to like the some random website for either the company or some other version, like it would send you to Flickster or it would send you to Voodoo or it would send you somewhere else. So that became a real not great experience. Thankfully, Movies Anywhere has kind of come in and taken over that particular space. So it aggregates them and you can play them on their site. And so it can aggregate from different digital sites. And a lot of times when you get the chance, you can choose, do I want this? You get the digital card in the Blu-ray, and I'll say, okay, which service do you want to do it? And then it'll give you a couple of options like Movies Anywhere, or do you want it to be Apple or anything like that. The nice thing about um, Movies Anywhere is it can link to your iTunes. your Apple Movie account, and so anything you put into Movies Anywhere can get loaded onto your iTunes account, so you can play them from the same thing. Um, that's pretty cool. Movies Anywhere also has a rental or a loan feature where you can certain movies you can like basically quote loan them to a friend, where you can give them access to your movie, which is kind of cool. Um, the I do have Voodoo accounts too, because there's certain things that are only on Voodoo or that I had to get through Voodoo um, from previous stuff. So those are basically down to the three that I primarily use that almost everything is on. So it's a pretty nice setup now. It's gotten a lot better than it used to be.
Yeah, Voodoo can be really nice if you're sharing it with people, because you can have, I believe, up to 7 unique email addresses on that account. And so that's what me and all my brothers have. And we have like 400 plus movies on there because it's all of our movie collections basically put together.
Yeah.
And any one of us can access it at any time and check stuff out, which is really cool.
Yeah. Um, yeah, so I think it's a good rundown of movie ownership. Do you have anything else to say on the topic?
I just need to, get back on this project because I'm looking at all these boxes right now, and I'm like, you could be digital,
This
but
always
just
rem Good.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
This always reminds me, it's like whenever the price is close between Blu-ray and 4K, I've always been buying the 4K, even though I don't have a 4K TV or a 4K player. I'm doing that in anticipation of when I finally get around to having a 4K player.
Yeah.
But I don't yet have permission to spend the money on those things. So hopefully
Yeah,
one
there
day.
there is absolutely a difference between the quality of a Blu-ray and 4K. I
Absolutely.
can tell you that because I have a 4K TV, and watch a lot of 4K content on it, and it's a pretty significant difference.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so that's our discussion for this week. Let's move on to our watch list. Movies we've watched over the past week. Rob, give us an update.
So I've continued to watch a movie every night, except for last night when I fell asleep halfway through the movie and need to finish the original Pet Cemetery tonight because that was the one
Okay.
I watched. Um, a couple that stick out to me from the last week. I watched Jeepers Creepers
Mm,
1 and 2.
okay.
Jeepers Creepers stars Justin Long,
Mm,
um, and involves this alien slash vampire slash. I'm not really sure what this thing is. It's creepy. It's weird. If you want to watch a weird horror movie, watch Jeepers Creepers because it's just it kind of just feels like a mishmash of 1,000 different ideas all rolled into one, and they're like, this doesn't really make coherent sense at all. But let's just make a movie out of it.
yeah.
Uh, it is a little creepy, but I mean, there are some definitely very creepy parts to it. And the reason why I say like it's a mismatch because there are some like really scary moments, but there are also some really like horror corny tropey moments in it. So it almost feels like it can't decide what it wants to be.
Yeah.
Um, but it made it an interesting movie to watch. I also watched Cabin in the Woods again,
Okay.
and as we were talking about earlier, sometimes you don't know where things are. That's not currently streaming anywhere, which really surprised me.
Hmm.
So I actually had to rent that one. I rented it through Apple Movies. I thought I owned it, but apparently I don't, or I never put it on anything digitally because I don't know where the disc is if I do own it. Um, I liked that movie when I first saw it. I like it even more now, having watched more horror movies, because
Mm,
there's so much in there about the cliches around horror movies, and it's really funny. And Chris Hemsworth is in it, and um, I recommend that if you haven't seen it, even if you don't love horror movies. I think that's a good one to watch. Cabin in the Woods.
interesting.
And I've watched a bunch of others, but those are the ones that stick out to me over the last week.
Fair enough. I watched two over the past week. I watched Dune again. This was one that I'd like started rewatching a couple weeks ago and then just finally gotten around to finishing this past week. And again, I just continue to be struck at just how beautiful a film it is. It's incredibly well done. And the complexity, it's the again, that source material is so dense and it's similar to I would say the closest thing is to the Lord of the Rings. It's just how much backstory, how much depth of content there is. There is an incredible level of depth of content, and to be able to direct that, it takes and explain that because you're having to learn not only just a whole new world, but there's like all this back political intrigue that you're trying to go through, and to be able to pull that off in such a way that the audience gets it, the audience understands what's happening, and how Dennis Villeneuve is able to show a lot of that visually, so that he doesn't get bogged down in all sorts of narrative exposition trying to explain everything. He shows so many things visually that it really, really helps move the story along, and I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think sci-fi is such a hard genre at times because you have that very fine line of how much do you tell the audience versus how much do you show the audience, how much do you trust the audience to be intelligent and to understand
Yeah.
things, because a lot of sci-fi movies bog down in trying to explain the entire world, and you can't explain the entire world if it's going to be effective.
Or you end up in a situation where you trust the audience, but because the film is ethereal and it requires so much trust in the audience, then you don't end up with a wider audience for it.
Mm-hmm.
I would say things like The Fountain or like Ex Machina fall into that category. Um, but yeah, Dune hits it out of the park, and that's why Dennis Villeneuve is so good at this. I mean, he really, really is. He's really good at this. Um, so that's Dune, and the second one I watched was Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice, the extended edition. And yeah, it's been a little while since I saw it, and I remember like the thing that stood out to me originally was kind of like, yeah, the whole moment with the whole Martha thing. If you're this is a little bit of a spoiler, but um the whole movie turns Batman hates Superman and is attempting to fight him and kill him, and then the whole thing turns around on a dime when Clark reveals that, you know, his mother's name is Martha and Bruce's mother's name is Martha, and all of a sudden they're best friends because their moms are named Martha. And it was really like, really, guys, that's what you came up with,
Yeah.
really? That's what originally struck me. What struck me this time was just I feel like they did a disservice to the characters. I think they, you know, whereas they did a pretty good job of getting Superman reasonably right in Man of Steel, they kind of turned that around and really, I don't like what they did with Superman. At the same time, I didn't really like what they did with Batman either. And so you have a Superman that you're like, I don't think they got that. And a Batman, you're like, okay. And so, like, that's your movie. That's your movie. I think that one thing they did reasonably well was the introduction of Wonder Woman. They slow played that well, and then she kind of comes out of nowhere at the end and helps them. I think that was kind of cool. I think they did a good job with that. Otherwise, it's just, I mean, you know, Jesse Eisenberg is crazy, so he's reasonable as Lex Luthor. But yeah, there's just a lot of stuff that just it just didn't quite do what it was supposed to.
Yeah, I think that's the DC universe's catchphrase, actually.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. All right, Rob, you got anything else?
I do not.
All right. Well, that is the show. Thank you for tuning into Film for Fans podcast. Make sure you visit filmforfans.com where we have great written content, and check us out on YouTube if you'd like to see our smiling faces and Rob's array of Pittsburgh gear, unfortunately. Until next time, enjoy the movies.